Hello, it's the 5th of July, and I'm continuing my journey to hopefully winning the Canberra Chess Club Championship this year in 2023. Today, the bit of training we're going to do for chess is one of these master level games, and today the master chess players are GM Bartholomew and Alexander Bortnyk. We're going to be trying to play as GM Bartholomew, essentially, who's got the white pieces. So we're going to try and predict his moves. Obviously, we can't predict the first move, so we'll just put that one on the board right away. He starts with knight f3, and Bortnyk plays knight f6. And basically the way these videos work is it's like solitaire chess, where I try and guess the moves that Bartholomew plays. And then we're going to watch a video where Bartholomew actually explains his whole thought process. And we'll see where things made sense for me and where they didn't make sense for me, and hopefully we'll learn something along the way. So what I do know about knight f3 is that often it, as the first move, often leads to sort of queen's pawn style openings. So I wouldn't be surprised here to see something like d4 or c4, but again, can't really predict it, so let's have a look. c4 is played, and Bortnyk plays b6. Now, clearly he's wanting to put his bishop here, and the bishop and the knight together are getting quite a nice hold on the e4 square. Our knight's very naturally going to develop out to c3, and we could consider putting our a pawn there on d3 to also control that square. But then our bishop here would be pinned under a weight of 3 pawns over here and another pawn over here. And if we wanted to get it out, well, we could play either of these pawns forward and make a little hole for it. But look, I think I'd probably play this regardless of what I end up doing with the pawn, whether I play d4 or whether I play knight b3. Probably doesn't matter so much. So we'll see what Bartholomew did. He actually plays g3 immediately. I guess, that makes sense if I think he's maybe going to aim to play d3 in future, because those moves just seem to be coupled in my mind, that if you're looking at this square and you're wanting to protect it with this pawn chain, then it does make sense with this pawn chain here to fianchetto the bishop over this way. So maybe he has that in mind already at this point. Fianchetto. And he's going to fianchetto the other one as well. So what to do here? I think this is a natural move. Castles. Excuse me. Excuse me. Castles is also a very natural move. I'm not going to spend too much time about that. And after he fianchettos, he actually goes ahead and plays d4. So he actually wasn't trying to protect this square, and having this pawn chain here probably wasn't the reason why he wanted to fianchetto this bishop. It's probably opening theory. It's probably not bad suggestions that I was making. So we'll just continue on. I'm happy with this style of play. You can consider this pawn's probably going to come here in future. Whether the bishop comes out first, probably not. This bishop's got a lot of scope on this diagonal, so you wonder whether you might see something like this in future. Maybe, but I think this is more natural. Anyway, Bortnyk castles, and here again, I think this is natural, this is natural. Lots of moves are probably fine. We develop the knight, and Bortnyk jumps in with his knight. Now this knight is defended, but if he captures, we're going to have to take back with the pawn. And that pawn will solidify the d4 pawn. However, the d4 pawn doesn't really need solidifying. It's already defended twice. If we want to, we could put a bishop here so that if he takes the knight, we can take back with the bishop. Of course, that gives him an opportunity to take the bishop. We can then take back. And I guess the downside there is we've given him the bishop pair, and we've given up our own dark squared bishop. The upside is we've got easy development. Our queen's up, our rooks are connected. So, look, I think that's a way that you could play. Certainly a way you could play. You could also consider taking here. He's going to have to take back. And even maybe from there, you could play something like this, attacking the bishop again. If he takes this, you take with your king. And I think that's all right, but you don't really have much of an attack. Things kind of are fizzling out. Maybe you could consider a move like this to protect the knight. But then if he takes and you actually take with the queen, well, then it should be all right. It should be all right. After he takes, you take back. Maybe he puts his knight here, or maybe pushes a pawn forward in order to defend the rook from our bishop. But in all circumstances, I think they're all okay. What would I actually do in a game? Look, I think this move makes sense because you're also threatening the knight because you're attacking it twice. It's only defended once. So you're kind of very much encouraging this trade. And if you then take with the queen, you are stepping into alignment with the bishop. That's the thing I don't love about that. And if the whole point of putting the queen here is to prevent having to take with the pawn, then you would have to take with the queen. But if I don't really want to take with the queen in that scenario, then maybe I just leave this whole situation alone. Maybe I can play something even like this or like this. Probably they're all okay because it doesn't seem like there's anything major that can go on. We could consider a move like this to threaten the knight. But then knight takes, we take back, and bishop takes. Taking the pawn with a tempo on the rook. Rook has to move. I don't like that. Why should I like that? So, look, I think any of these moves is probably okay. Let's see what John Bartholomew got up to. He took the knight, and after takes back. What was his idea after takes back? Maybe he wants to now play something like this, although that just opens up this bishop. That just opens up the bishop. Maybe he's going to play this or this. Let's see. Indeed, he does put the bishop here. Does seem a little bit awkward blocking this pawn in, but it also allows the rook into the game. It defends this pawn a lot better. Everything's very stable here, and in the future this bishop can move again somewhere and free this pawn if need be. But it does seem like a very quiet position. Now after d5, we can take. If bishop takes, no big deal. We've opened up the C file for ourselves, made it into a half-open C file that we can put a rook on in the future. If he takes with the queen, then we can play something like this, where we go for further trades potentially. Again, everything seems nullified. There's no real attacking chance here. JB goes for Queen a4. I guess the idea is he is defending this pawn. He's defending the pawn. What else is he doing here? What's the other purpose of this move? Not too sure. Not too sure what the other purpose of the move is, but okay, he's developing the queen. After takes, queen takes, knight comes out. Puts a rook on the d file. See, I there probably would have been more tempted to put a rook on the c file. But I guess we're not really attacking this knight because it's defended by the bishop. So puts it on the d file. This way we're maybe threatening something like this. And if he ever takes back, we take back with the rook. And if his knight moves somewhere, there we could take. But if it comes over here, then I suppose, well, we can maybe just drop back to start with. No, we can't drop back there because of the bishop. Can't drop back here because of this bishop. We could come back all the way here, but maybe we wouldn't really want to. We could come even somewhere like this. Yeah, I'm not too sure about that idea. Queen comes out. Now we put a rook on the c file. He's going to trade queens because as a black, he looks like he's happy with the draw in this game. We've got to move the rook. Let's move it back. Brings the rook in here. Can we do something like this and go after this knight? Yes. Trade, trade. I mean, I would take back here, obviously. But that's actually the end of the game, and it's a draw. So kind of a really quiet game, that one, and I'm not sure we got too much from it. But let's switch over now and see what John Bartholomew had to say about this game. All right, I've been watching the video. So far, so steady. We're now just going to get to the point where I was saying I would instinctively probably put a rook on the c file. I did say that, that may not be great in the sense that the queen can't ever really take the knight. But I think here's where John Bartholomew played rook to d1. And let's just see what his reasoning was there.
At this point, I played the move rook fd1. So bringing a rook to the d file, backing up my d pawn, also eyeing up this black queen on d8, kind of x-raying it. I think it's more ambitious, though, to play rook ac1. This is what the engine was recommending afterwards. And if I could do this over, I probably would play this here. This ensures that if the knight were to move in the future, I can take this pawn. So puts a little bit of pressure. If black tries to back my queen off, I can maybe just play queen a4 and introduce rook takes c6 as a threat even. I kind of suspect he would have met this move with queen d5, which may end up looking somewhat similar to the game. But I have some extra options. I won't go too deep here in the interest of keeping things kind of clean. But knight e1 is one move that the computer was potentially recommending here, looking for a swap of the bishops and a swap of the queens even, with perhaps some residual pressure here down the file. I think this could also result in some interesting play. Black could try knight d8 here, and then on rook takes c7, try to send the knight to e6 and fork. But I am scooping a pawn, and black may not get enough compensation in a line like this. So this is just one potential line the engine was spitting out at me afterwards.
So interesting there that, I didn't see all those complications at all, but the instinct to put a rook on this c file here was a good one. And I was aware also, though I didn't mention it, that although we can't take the knight, we are pressuring behind the knight. So if the knight moves, we'd be able to scoop the pawn up here. So, not a bad suggestion there. Not a bad suggestion, but his rook d1 move also makes sense from a point of view of being very solid. Let's see what else he had to say about it, if anything.
Not necessarily forced, but interesting that white can think about playing this way with knight e1 and looking to break up this strong play that black has on this diagonal. So I think that was more ambitious, but I played this solid move rook fd1, and he responded with queen d5. And at this point, I knew I had a decision to make in terms of keeping the queen's honor off the board. Queen a4, if I want to avoid a queen trade, didn't quite look right to me. I think that could lead to a much more complicated fight, but I didn't see a clear way to break this up. Maybe I could try for knight e1 in the future, but it seems a little odd to play queen a4, queen takes c4, and then queen back to a4, and more or less admit that black's queen d5 move was good in backing off the queen. I didn't want to initiate the trade myself. I would rather black initiate the trade. So at this point, I played rook ac1. I back up my queen. And Alexander took the queen. So queen takes c4. We get a trade. And then he played bishop d5, hitting the rook. I saw all of this. Even though this x-rays my pawn down on a2, I wasn't concerned because I knew this bishop would have to stay guarding the knight. So I played rook c3. Interesting move that the computer points out. I don't think I considered it really at all. This allows bishop to take c4. And the idea is actually just to recapture, banking on the fact that this pressure will allow white to regain the material. So the engine was giving something like knight b4, bishop takes a8, rook takes a8, with rough equality. Because this pawn's under attack, the knight may reposition here, materials back to equal. So an idea I didn't consider, but kind of an intriguing way to try to trade the bishops or encourage black to actually take on c4. But I played rook c3, and I went to c3 because I thought I might be able to double up the rooks.
Interestingly, when I was talking about backing the rook off, I didn't realize that the pawn was hanging, so I missed that detail. And I also missed that if the bishop took the pawn, the rook could take the knight. I missed that detail as well. So these are things you got to be more aware of, really, these little details.
I want to go back to c1 with my rook that's on c4 and not have that option. So I thought rook c3 looking to double would be useful. If I go to c2 instead, knight b4 is in the air, so I don't like that as much. And on rook c3, he responded with rook a d8. Useful move. This escapes potential pressure down this long diagonal and backs up the bishop and introduces further pressure on d4. And at this point, I kind of saw how the game would very likely continue. I played rook d to c1, which I think is by far my most natural move, threatening the knight on c6. And here, Alexander played bishop takes f3. So giving the light square bishop, and with this move, he offered a draw. We're on move 16. He offered the draw. And I thought for maybe about 2 minutes, and I took the draw. I won't leave you guys in suspense. I took the draw here. And I saw that this was going to get simplified. Let's say I played bishop takes f3, although I did briefly consider e takes f3. Turns out that's not very good. But bishop takes f3, knight takes d4. Remember, there's no pin on this knight anymore, so knight takes d4. And here there's a couple different routes. I can either play rook takes c7 or bishop takes d4. If bishop takes d4, we get into an opposite color bishop situation. I do regain the pawn, but black takes on b2. I figured this was almost certainly going to be drawn, something like bishop a3 defending e7. I can pick off this pawn on a7, bishop c5. It's 5 pawns each, opposite color bishops. Yeah, this rook is marginally more active than any rook black has, but that's not enough to do damage in these positions. The engine is showing triple zeros here, so completely equal. So could play bishop takes d4 and angle for that, but I do think that leads to a fairly easy draw. Rook takes c7 was the move I was more seriously considering, because then after knight takes f3 check, pawn takes f3, we're at least in a same color bishop position. But taking this a little further, bishop takes b2, rook c2. Here, black is up a pawn, and although they will have to give a pawn back, I didn't think I could pressure much from here. So, for example, bishop d4 is pretty solid in this position. We could have a trade of bishops, and then I take my choice as to which pawn to pick off. Perhaps I have a bit of pressure here. There's even some rook endings. This is just some engine analysis where white may go up a pawn, but it's very, very difficult to win with white having some weaknesses and the rook not being particularly active.
So I'll leave the analysis there from John Bartholomew, but what I found interesting there, and I guess what I can take away, is there was a couple moments in the game where he was talking big picture ideas. So for instance, at this point here, he was talking about, he knew he had a decision about whether to keep the queens on the board, whether to try and keep, whether to accept a trade of queens. And if he accepts a trade, does he initiate it, or does he play rook c1 and allow black to initiate it? Or does he want to escape the queen somewhere else? That was one example of one of these kind of big picture decisions, like keep queens on the board, don't keep queens on the board. If you keep queens on the board, how to do that. And he ended up doing it in this way. Another example was actually there at the very end. Well, actually after the end, when he was considering, the variations that could take place after a move like this. And that, if he takes this and Bortnyk takes back, now we've got this opposite colored bishop's ending. And in this opposite colored bishop's ending, it's very much a drawish tendency for the game. A very drawish tendency for the game, whereas he was considering that if instead he immediately takes this pawn and allows this trade, now at least it's same colored bishops. So those are again big picture sort of concepts. Do you trade queens? Do you angle for a position with opposite colored bishops? Do you angle for a position with same colored bishops but a worse pawn structure? And those were the things that helped him essentially draw with a grandmaster, which is always a nice thing to do, to be able to do. Not something I've ever been able to do myself, but there's always hope for the future, right? Regardless, this game was pretty quiet, and I'm going to leave it as a short video, but thank you for watching, and we'll be back again next time with probably another tactics training session, and after that, we'll do our training game for the week. So we'll see you then.